You know, a lot of people cite Kingdom of the Crystal Skull as the most controversial of all the Indiana Jones movies, but I think Temple of Doom is more so. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom came out in 1984. Once again, brings back Harrison Ford in the iconic role of Indiana Jones. Is once again directed by Spielberg, produced by George Lucas. And this movie, though it's the follow-up to Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's actually a prequel and takes place 1 year before the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but doesn't really set up anything in that movie. This is another standalone, which I'm very appreciative of. So the movie opens up with Indiana Jones in Shanghai, where he's on a special mission, and then he leaves in anticipation to heading back to America, but he pissed off the guy that he made a deal with. So he, along with a little Chinese boy named Short Round and a dancer named Willie, gets stranded in India, where they're suddenly taken in by a village who had a sacred stone stolen from them, in addition to all their children. So Indy and company are eventually escorted to this palace, where they discover a temple that houses a Thuggee cult that has enslaved all the children and has stolen their sacred stones in order to make sacrifices for the goddess Kali. Now, when I say Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is a more divisive and controversial film than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I say that because the majority of opinions with Crystal Skull seem to be that it's terrible, it's awful, unwatchable. I haven't rewatched it since its Blu-ray release, so you guys will wait till my review for me to talk about it. But with Temple of Doom, it's very much in the specter of you either love the movie or you hate the movie. And for me, I'm caught somewhere in the middle. Temple of Doom is very iconic, no question about it. It has some fantastic moments to it, but it's also got a lot of things in it that just make you cringe. And it's just terrible in some parts. Let's talk about these controversial bits first of all. One thing that I noticed watching the movie is that some of the dialogue is really terrible, and this is not written by Lawrence Kasdan like the first movie was. It's written by somebody else, and just watching it, I could definitely tell it's not by the same writer, because there are a lot of lines in this movie, particularly when it comes to Willie, that are just bad. They're either poorly delivered or they're just bad dialogue altogether that nobody could have made sound good. The one point of controversy with this movie is that it could be a tad racist, and I can kind of see that in the sense that the villains of the movie are just really cartoony. When I was in college at UC Santa Cruz, one of the very last papers that I wrote was a comparison of how Indian people are portrayed in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and A Passage to India. And I gotta say that this movie is definitely very cartoonish in terms of its villains, whereas Passage to India is a little more subtle, but you also have Sir Alec Guinness, who everyone knows as Obi-Wan Kenobi, playing an Indian guy, and it's not very subtle. And a lot of people cite Short Round as being like Mickey Rooney's character in Breakfast at Tiffany's. I don't agree to a certain extent. There are a few points where Short Round can get on your damn nerves. I mean, there are a few points where he got on mine, but I ultimately like Short Round in the end because he's crafty, he's reliable, and he's dedicated to his friends. And that's something I like in a character. But back to this movie and its portrayal of Indian people, it just comes across as cartoonish to me. Not wildly offensive, but just not subtle at all. It's just very over the top at points. Now let's just get back to the characters. The next person I'm going to talk about is the big make it or break it moment. If you are not bothered by this character in the movie, then you might be able to enjoy it all right. But if you are downright annoyed by her, then this is probably not going to sit well for you. And that character is Willie. How did we go from Marion Ravenwood to this? Marion was one of many prime examples of strong female characters because she's ultimately reliant and she's tough. Then you got Willie, which is almost downright offensive to women because all she cares about is her looks. She cares about jewelry, glamour, and like watching this movie, all she does is scream constantly. She is pretty much the stereotypical blonde damsel in distress, and she is almost fucking useless. And what makes it worse is that she has no reason to be in this. She just gets roped in by accident. She pretty much enters this adventure the same way Jar Jar Binks became a part of the Phantom Menace, where she just got in the way, had no reason at all to be a part of this adventure, but hey, we're stuck with her, so fuck. And you know what? I'm not even going to blame Kate Capshaw on this one, who plays Willie, because I feel like this is an instance where it's in the writing. Like I mentioned, this wasn't written by Lawrence Kasdan, and aside from some of the bad dialogue that's in this movie, the way Willie is written is just... it's cringeworthy. It's embarrassing to watch. And probably the worst scene in the movie for me, and probably the entire franchise as a whole, is the scene where they're camping out. Willie just runs into a bunch of random animals and is screaming at the top of her lungs. Meanwhile, you got Short Round and Indiana Jones sitting by the fire playing cards as they're arguing back and forth about them cheating. And it's just one of these things where there's so much noise going on. It's so frenetic and just crazy. You want to go, shut the fuck up, for God's sake. Be quiet, everyone. But it just boils down to Willie that makes this probably the worst scene in the entire franchise. Willie is just an absolute embarrassment, and I got nothing else to say. Now let's dive into the positives, because there are some things in this movie that I ultimately do like a lot. For one, the John Williams score. Yeah, it's cliche of me to say, but the Indiana Jones theme is still there, and there are a lot of great new music cues that he makes for this film, like the theme for the slave children, and the sound design is still really top-notch, once again, and the action scenes are still fun. However, unlike Raiders of the Lost Ark, which had very grounded and plausible action scenes, Temple of Doom has many moments where they just break physics. The one moment everyone points to is when Indy and company have to escape the plane and they're on the raft. This is something that Mythbusters even tested to see if it was possible to jump out of a plane onto an inflatable raft and survive. And that myth was obviously busted, and watching this movie, it just looks so stupid. You're like, no. No, 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 no. There are many moments when I watch movies where I can suspend my disbelief, like that giant boulder in Raiders of the Lost Ark. I question it, but I just kind of go along with it. This is an instance where I can't accept it. I'm sorry, it's just so stupid. Indy and company would have been dead a million times, and if they were, sucks that we lost Indiana Jones, but thank God Willie's gone. The other two great action scenes I love are the minecart chase in the third act, which is a ton of fun. It gives you a lot of adrenaline, and it's just entertaining all around, even though you have to wonder, who designed a tunnel like this and mine tracks like that? Was it the Disney Imagineers that made the Indiana Jones ride in Disneyland Paris? And then we got the big finale of the movie where our characters are on a bridge. Indy goes, "Prepare to meet Kali in hell." Chops it in half, and you see a bunch of the bad guys fall into the river, get eaten by crocodiles. It's an iconic scene, and Harrison Ford is still really good as Indiana Jones. In fact, this is the movie that I think more cements him as the iconic hero. I'll still prefer him in Raiders of the Lost Ark because I think he's more well-written. The movie's overall more well-written. But this is the one that really cements Indiana Jones as a hero, a true hero, and it works well. So ultimately, Temple of Doom is a mixed bag. It's hard for me to really go out there and say it's a good movie, so I'm ultimately going to have to say watch at your own risk, but in more of an enthusiastic sense. It has some good moments to it. I also do like how this movie plays on a few gags that the first movie did. For example, that big elaborate fight between Indy and the swordsman in Cairo. We actually get it this time around because Indy tries to pull out his gun to shoot the swordsman, but nothing happens, so he has to fight them and use his whip, so it's cool that we got that scene in this movie. But there's a lot of bad in it, where it's just goofy, and sometimes it can be downright insulting. And Willie, ugh. So there you go, that's my review for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Next week we're going to be talking about a better Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which I gotta be honest is the Indiana Jones movie that I've watched the least. So I can't wait to revisit this one. And until next week, I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on the movie. If and when you've seen it, don't forget to support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until next time, this is the Real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.